Hey everyone, welcome back to Haley on the Go. This week we have a truly incredible guest, someone who was the award recipient of Time Magazine's Woman of the Year award, the subject of an award winning documentary, and she sued the state of Texas. Amanda Zurawski, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. That's quite the intro. Very generous. Thank you.
It's all true. Your story is one of such resilience and also just absolutely gut wrenching and infuriating. I want us to start at the very beginning. If you could share a bit about what happened to you in 2022 in Texas.
Sure. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I live in Texas, which has one of the strictest, in my opinion, most cruel abortion bans in the country. And I was pregnant and I was over the moon. My husband and I were thrilled to be pregnant. It was our first. And things were going really well for the first 18 weeks. And then, unfortunately, I suffered a complication called PPROM, which basically means my cervix was dilating prematurely and my water broke. And so we found out that there was no way to safely reverse course, and we were going to lose the baby. And there was nothing that doctors could do to save her, unfortunately. Now, at that point, under normal circumstances or in a different state, my doctor should have been able to induce labor so that I could deliver the baby and start healing. But the trigger ban in Texas went into effect the exact same week that my water broke. So inducing labor would have been considered an illegal abortion because the baby's heart was still beating. So I had to wait either until her heart stopped beating or until I met the medical exception in Texas to deserve care, which is life of the mother. So essentially, what that meant is I had to be on death's door before I could get treatment. And that's exactly what happened. 3 days later, I went into septic shock, nearly died. Fortunately, doctors were able to stabilize me long enough to deliver the baby. But then I had another bout of sepsis, was in the ICU for, I think it was about 3 days, and I was in the hospital for a grand total of a week because of the trauma that I was forced to go through. Bear in mind, none of that had to happen. Had they been able to act when I was diagnosed, none of that would have happened. Totally preventable.
Sensible makes you sick to hear the story and is unfortunately far too common in this country. So first, thank you for sharing that with all of us. I want to ask when the doctors told you with no with complete certainty that you were going to lose the child, did you ever even think about the law and how that would implicate the next steps? Did that even come in your mind?
Yeah, well, it became pretty clear to us pretty quickly because, like I said, I went into septic shock and I went into septic shock extremely quickly. And so I could tell that my doctor was worried that something really bad could happen because she suddenly was not frantic, but I could tell she was extremely concerned. And she said, under normal circumstances, this is what we would be able to do. However, this new law just took effect this week. And so I need to consult with the ethics board at the hospital.
Mm.
And she wanted to get a number of second opinions. What I later learned was that she was calling like every colleague she could, not just in Austin where I live, but throughout the entire state of Texas, saying, what do you think I can do here? What does this law mean? If I send her to you, will you treat her? And every single one of her colleagues said no. So it became pretty clear pretty quickly that that's what we were up against. And it was just a layer of fury on top of the trauma and grief that we were already experiencing. It was so cruel and like I said, unnecessary.
This is such a clear example of why bans don't work and why these decisions need to be left between a woman or person and their provider. But it also kind of sheds light on the fact that this impacts not just patients, but it really impacts doctors too. Some stats that I think are really important is that 1 in 5 OBGYNs have left the state of Texas where you live since the abortion ban has come in place. And this year, Time Magazine found that in the year after Dobbs, 42% of clinicians that provide abortion care, which are just OBGYNs for the most part, have left states with near total bans to relocate to states that allow them to practice care at the standard that they think they need to be able to be good doctors. And it is creating a care crisis across this country. It impacts communities that need it the most, communities of color, low income communities, rural communities the most. Doctors don't want these bans. They want to be able to make these decisions with patients. How did the doctor navigate having that conversation with you? I mean, clearly she was doing everything she could. What what was it that she how did she explain it to you?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a healthcare crisis. That's exactly what we're dealing with here in this country, and it's a real tragedy. Um, in my case, my physician and I had been her patient for almost a decade at this
Oh,
point.
wow.
So we were very close. We had a very good relationship. However, the law had just gone into effect. I think it was 2 days after my water broke. So she wasn't familiar with all of the ins and outs of it yet, right? And I think doctors still aren't familiar with the ins and outs of it because of the way that it's written, which is intentional. Lawmakers have made it very confusing so that doctors, have this layer of confusion while they're trying to practice, which is their expertise, right? It's ridiculous. Um, so she said, I don't think that I can induce labor because I think as long as the baby's heart is still beating, that's now illegal. And so I could tell that just because the timing of my case was so new and so fresh with this new law, I could tell that she was trying to work it out in her head as we're going along, which is not what we want doctors to be doing. They should not be trying to figure out a law while they're potentially saving lives, right? And so, like I mentioned earlier, she had to consult with an ethics board. She had to call colleagues. I mean, it was really an all hands on deck situation as physicians try to navigate the lack of clarity in these laws, which is just not what they should be doing in these cases.
And the laws are changing so frequently that it's just so confusing. After you left the hospital, you did something incredibly courageous. I think most people, myself, would probably have turned into a hermit, but you decided to sue the state of Texas. And Zurawski v. Texas was the first time since the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court that a pregnant person brought a challenge against an abortion ban. What
Yep,
was
that's
going
right.
through your mind when you filed this case? How did it come to be?
I think what you're really asking is why are you so crazy?
No, we
Um,
applauded.
looking back, it was a bit of a crazy thing to do. So I will say, going into it, I did not know what to expect. I had no idea that it would turn into sort of this movement and get all of the momentum that it eventually did. And I think I was fortunate in that respect because it kind of built in real time. Had I known exactly what I was diving into from the jump, I think it would have been harder, which is something that I'd like to point out because there were 21 other plaintiffs on the suit, all of whom joined after I did, which is why my name is the one on the case. And they knew what they were jumping into, right? And so I think that's a whole different level of bravery that they had to summon because they knew exactly what they were getting themselves into. I really didn't. Um, I remember when it was first proposed to me, have you considered suing? I was like, well, who am I going to sue? My doctor? She didn't do anything wrong. And our attorney said, no, we would sue the state of Texas. And I was like, how do you sue a state? But it turns out you can. So yeah, it just kind of, was something I felt pretty strongly about. My husband felt pretty strongly about. I've always been a fighter. I felt a lot of injustice, and it was important to me to stand up for what I believe in, not just for myself, but for all of the other women in Texas and across the country who I knew would be impacted by this ban and others.
I want to talk a bit about the plaintiffs that joined you. 22 other people joined your case to share their personal experiences and stories about what happened to them while living in Texas, which is a huge number, but probably just a small fraction. The maternal mortality rate in Texas has risen 56% in the last few years, which is insurmountable to really think about what that means. What did it feel like realizing how many other people had experienced or had an experience similar to yours, even though it was, their own story, but were stepping up and joining this case?
Um, First and foremost, it broke my heart because knowing that there were other people who were going through something similar to what I had makes you sick to your stomach, like you said at the beginning, right? It's horrific, it's inhumane, it's cruel. But then as I got to know the other plaintiffs and as we, kind of moved through the legal process, I was just so proud of them, and I was proud of the fact that, we had laid the groundwork with the suit for people to speak up and to fight back. And I was just so proud of them for doing that, because attaching your name to a lawsuit is not easy, right? And
Mhm.
speaking out about something that is so personal and so traumatic is extremely difficult. So to know that there were other women who were willing to do the same thing as me, and so many others, by the way, not just my co-plaintiffs on my suit, but across the country, women are doing this.
Yep.
And it's just really empowering to know that we're helping people find their voice and use it to fight back.
While going through this process of fighting back, what surprised you most about the legal system when it comes to cases like this?
I think everything, because I had not done anything like this before. I had never had a lawyer. I had never sued anyone. So I learned a lot. It was fascinating. I think what surprised me was the way that the states and the Attorney General of Texas's team treated us. I think going into the trial and or I'm sorry, the hearing, and going into preparation, I think I thought that they would be more human than they were, and I think I thought that they would at least recognize the trauma and the grief, or at least the loss. Like, at the end of the day, every single one of us had lost a baby. But they didn't. They were extremely cruel. They never, said, "I'm sorry for your loss," or even acknowledged it. The way they spoke to us was very condescending. It was very rude, and I found myself wondering a lot throughout the process, truly, how these people sleep at night. Like, what kinds of mental gymnastics must they do to make themselves feel good enough about themselves that they can sleep after what they've done to these women who have already been so traumatized in the courtroom. It was really, it was hard for me to witness that.
And at the core of the argument from a lot of the people on your, I would guess, say your opposition is the concept of being pro life. So you would think that that loss would be something that resonates deeply with them and at least brings out that human emotion. So I first want to apologize that that was an experience you even had to go through, but thank you for doing it. The case ultimately made its way all the way up to the state Supreme Court, where
That's right.
they ruled in favor of the ban or keeping the ban in place as is and not providing additional exceptions because you weren't even looking to overturn the ban correctly, but correct, but make sure that there are actual exceptions that work in place for people like yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we weren't even trying to repeal the ban, or restore Roe or anything like that. All we were asking for was literally the bare minimum. We were asking for them to clarify the language in the law. And as you said, they unanimously ruled against it.
So when they issued that ruling, what did you feel that day? Take me back to finding out that that's how they were going to rule.
Well, it took a really long time. We filed in March of 2023, and they didn't release their decision until May of 2024. So it was a very long process. And throughout that time, we knew what we were up against, right? And by the time it made it to the Texas Supreme Court, we know the makeup of the Texas Supreme Court is 9 Republican, historically conservative justices. So we we were hopeful, of course, but we were realistic. Um, so the fact that they ruled against us wasn't necessarily surprising. And also by this time, we had already built up enough momentum and sparked enough of a conversation that I think we were really proud of what we had done. And I think we felt like the suit had accomplished a lot of good. So that maybe helped soften the blow, but I mean, it was still devastating, right? They unanimously ruled against us. And I think the worst part about it was in the decision, they did not use a single plaintiff's name except for mine.
Mm.
And what that said to me was that they were just trying to erase us from history, erase our stories, silence our voices, tell us that this wasn't real, that this wasn't happening. And that to me was the worst part, was going through the decision and reading it and just getting sicker and sicker to my stomach, seeing how they just completely wrote us off as human beings. And it was um, really infuriating for me that all of my other plaintiffs names were completely left out. It was really heartbreaking.
Well, I want to reassure you that the case did make a difference. I mean, so many people I know in the work that I do and in spaces that I am talk about it all the time. And it was really used as a way to help have conversations with people who don't understand the broader impacts of abortion bans and restrictions on reproductive health care. And we'll get to it later, but I know that the plaintiffs' names live on through a very powerful documentary, which we're definitely going to talk about. But I want to talk a little bit more about your activism first, because I know that you didn't stop at the Texas State Supreme Court, but you brought this fight nationally, including talking to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is a scary feat to go and sit in front of all of them. I know you came face to face with your senators in Texas and told them that they just need to step up and take care of the women in their state. Have either of them ever reached out to you in any way?
No, and actually, it's funny that you say I came face to face with them because I only kind of did because they left the room during my testimony
Mm,
and wouldn't even listen.
that's just so shameful, like truly shameful
Yeah,
to hear.
it's cowardly. They're cowards.
Absolutely, and they represent you, someone who doesn't represent you, but who stayed in the room and is also very shameful. I learned by rewatching your documentary yesterday was, that Senator Lindsey Graham rolled his eyes very theatrically when you commented that
Yeah,
being pregnant in America is dangerous. The United States has the highest maternal mortality rate of any developed nation in the world. This is not something that is really up for discussion, but what
right.
was your reaction when he did that?
Well, the good news is I did not track it in real time. I didn't see it until later. I think if I had, it would have been bad news. I don't know that the table separating me from the senators would have kept me in my seat. And I had to do a lot of that day. I had to really temper my anger because to be face to face with these people who support bans like the one in Texas was really awful. But I will point out that there were also, several pro-choice supportive senators in the room, and they were lovely and very supportive and very, very nice. So that was a little ointment for the Lindsey Graham situation.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And this is kind of all talked about in the documentary, Zurawski v. Texas. And it is so beautiful and so powerful. And I think everyone needs to go watch it if you haven't. And produced by such a powerful cast of women alongside of you: Chelsea Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Jennifer Lawrence, Kerry Washington, I think, to name a few of the people involved in passionately making sure the story was told. How did this come to be? Getting it on screen, making it happen?
Yeah, good question. Another thing I never thought I would do is be in a documentary. Um, so our legal team at the Center for Reproductive Rights had worked with the filmmakers before on another film called Jackson, and it's about the last abortion clinic in Mississippi.
Mm.
And so the filmmakers had been in touch with the center and they said, we want to do something post Roe. Let us know if you hear of anything interesting that perhaps we could turn into a film. And I said, oh, well, we have this thing that we think is pretty interesting that you might want to turn into a film. So the legal team then reached out to me and some of the other plaintiffs and said, hey, this is what's going on. Would you be interested? Would you be okay? And again, didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I was like, yeah, sure. If that helps, spread awareness for what's going on, then sure, yeah, let's talk about it. We met the directors, Macy Crow and Abby Perot, and after about 30 seconds, I mean, I just fell in love. They're wonderful, wonderful people. They're brilliant, as you alluded to, and they're just very, very special people who are actually still very special and involved in my life today.
Have you watched it, and what is the feeling kind of watching this really traumatic time of your life unfold on screen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't get to talk about this a lot. I have watched it. You can only watch yourself on screen so many times.
Yeah.
So I have only seen it maybe a handful of times. Um, it's really hard to watch because for my own journey, it puts me back in some of the most horrific points of my life. And then also watching my co-plaintiffs and what they were going through, I learned a lot about, the struggles that they were having at home during the suit that I didn't know about in real time. And so it breaks your heart to see your friends suffering and to see your friends in pain. Um, it's also kind of weird now because the film, I think it was filmed 2 years ago. Yeah, it was at the time of the suit, so it's 2 years ago. So I have moved on from that point in my life. Like I won't spoil it for anybody, but there's some things that happen that I have healed from. But when people watch it today, they don't recognize the time difference. And so I think they expect that we're still dealing with some of those things, which they will always be a part of us, but we're also now 2 years removed, have a lot of therapy and have healed, which is nice. But it's hard to go back in time and watch those moments.
You talk a lot about how this was 2 years ago, and I'm glad you've been able to find some healing and find some peace. But how did this whole journey change what your life looked like beforehand to now? I mean, you were sort of thrust into a national spotlight, into the activist space, and onto a national campaign. Has your life resumed somewhat of a semblance of what it's been before?
No, no, I don't think it ever will. I think I am forever changed in a good way. But no, I was, someone who worked from home and didn't even turn my camera on for Zoom meetings. And then all of a sudden, to your point, I was on national stages, literally. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to advocate and to tell my story and tell the stories of others. Reproductive freedom has become my number one priority. It's become my greatest passion. And so I continue to work in that space today, just making sure that people can have families or not have families whenever they want, however they want, and that there aren't politicians getting in the way. So, whatever that looks like, if it's, testifying in Texas, if it's joining another political campaign, I'm sure to do it.
And you talk about helping people have families if that's what they want. I know that you have opened up recently about your own journey with your husband to hopefully try to have a family again and going through the IVF process. How has that been?
Yeah, thank you. So I did recently complete an IVF cycle. Um, it's been it's been tough. I mean, IVF is incredibly hard, and I had done cycles before, so I kind of knew what I was signing up for. But to talk about it publicly, even though I've been so public about my life for the past 3 years, something about this felt different. I can't really explain why, but it felt like inviting people into a different level of privacy. And it was very scary. I'm very glad I did it though, because I've heard from a lot of people that it helped create community and it helped create conversation. I've heard people learned a lot, and I'm a former educator, so that means a lot to me. And I think it helps other people who are going through it feel seen and feel like they're not alone. And to me, that's incredibly important. So I wouldn't change it, but it was tough.
I think IVF and infertility and fertility treatments in general are so stigmatized in society that it feels so scary to talk about. So I can't imagine feeling fearful after everything that you've shared about your life, but thank you for continuing to be such an open book to people. A question I have for you about your IVF journey is I know from your septic experiences that you are unable to carry the child yourself. But if that wasn't the case, do you think that you would be open to trying to be pregnant again in Texas under the current bans? I think wanting to have a conversation around the way that the bans prevent people from deciding to start a family because it is so scary.
Yeah, you're right. If I could get pregnant again, there's no way I would choose to be pregnant in Texas. I mean, I said it 2 years ago and I'll say it again today. It's dangerous to be pregnant in Texas. It's probably more dangerous now because they're making it even worse. So no, I wouldn't want to be pregnant here. And in fact, because of what happened to me, my husband and I have to use a surrogate or gestational carrier. And during that process, when we were trying to find someone to work with, we didn't look in states where there are bans because we wouldn't want her to go through the same thing I went through. Now, I know that's not the right decision for everyone. I know other people wouldn't choose that route, but for me and Josh, that was really important to us because what we went through was so traumatic. I wouldn't put that risk on anyone.
You want to shout out your husband Josh too because he is such a great advocate, and I feel like there's not a lot of men in this fight, and he really took to it last year, and it's incredible.
Thank you. He's the best. I love him very much, and you're right. He's a great advocate, and he's been so brave. He was quite averse to public speaking in the beginning, and now he's a pro. So I've been so proud of him.
I think I seen him on the road a few times without you, so you would never know he was
Yeah.
averse to public speaking beforehand. I want to wrap us up by talking about kind of what you're looking forward to in the future and maybe some words you hope people keep about your story with them.
Yeah, I what I'm looking forward to in the future is just continuing to fight for reproductive freedom and reproductive justice and continuing to create spaces for people to use their own voices and to speak up and fight back. I am really hopeful for a day where I advocate myself out of a job and we don't have these things to talk about anymore. I think that would be the greatest success. I also am, like I mentioned, really passionate about helping people build their families however and whenever they want to. And I'm continuing that work through a fertility startup called It Is Sloan. And
Mm.
helping to bring IVF to folks and make it more accessible is something that I'm super passionate about, and I'm excited to help people do that. So just any way that I can help people build their families in the future it warms my heart and it gives me a lot of purpose.
I think that's such a perfect note to end on because I think so often people look at reproductive justice as restrictive, but it really is the most pro family policies that you can have, and helping people have families when, where, with whomever they want to is so at the heart of all of the work that you're doing and so many amazing advocates like you. So thank you so much for sharing your story and coming and being part our guest today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.